Morning, everyone. I'm Liza Lester from AGU. I'm happy to welcome you here to our 11 o'clock press briefing on the waves that changed the world. And I'm going to turn it right over to Alison Gillespie to introduce her panel. They will speak for about 20 minutes, then we'll go to Q&A from here in the room in Washington and also online, and we'll have a little more instruction for you at that point. So Alison, over to you.
Thank you so much. Ooh, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. December 2024 marks the 20th anniversary of the devastating tsunami that swept across the Indian Ocean and, after landfall, killed more than 222,000 people across 15 countries. The 2004 tsunami changed our understanding of tsunamis and the science of how we prepare for these natural disasters. This press conference will highlight the anniversary, but also cover the current state of tsunami science and research. And we will discuss international partnerships that currently are working to provide information on tsunamis to people around the globe, including the International Tsunami Information Center. Speakers will include experts who have worked on tsunami forecasting, warning systems, hazard assessment, and modeling over the last 2 decades. Today, we will hear about the impact of the waves. All of our speakers today have been working in the years since those waves hit in 2004 to improve our knowledge of these large waves. They've also been working to improve our response to them. I need to note before we begin that there's been a slight change to our agenda. Dr. Rita Karnawati, head of the Agency for Meteorology, Climatology, and Geophysics, which is abbreviated as BMKG in the Republic of Indonesia, could not be with us today. While we regret her absence, we are pleased to have subject matter expert Dr. Nelly Florida Riyama, who is the deputy head of geophysics for that same agency in Indonesia. Without further delay, I'll begin with Dr. Riyama.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I'm here on behalf of Professor Dwi Korita, who is unable to attend this press conference due to a national priority agenda regarding extreme event right now that happen in Indonesia. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami stands as a monumental event that awakened global awareness of devastating threat posed by tsunamis. At that time, Indonesia, represented by BMKG, the government institution responsible for providing information on earthquake and tsunami, faced significant limitation. The available manual sensors were only capable of recording earthquakes up to magnitude 6.5. However, as the catastrophic impacts unfolded, it became very clear for us at that time that the magnitude far exceeded this threshold. Fortunately, external information from international agencies such as USGS, PTWC, and GMA was available to support the response. Since 2004 tsunami, Indonesia has faced several unique and complex tsunami events that underscore the need for continuous improvement in its tsunami warning system. Each of these events has provided valuable lessons, reinforcing the necessity of advancing both seismic and non-seismic monitoring technology, foster strong leadership at both local and national level, implement a hybrid socio-technological approach, as we know that tackling this tsunami requires combining technological advancement with social strategies. Currently, Indonesia has made remarkable progress in advancing our end-to-end tsunami early warning system. We call it INATIUS, to enhance accuracy, detectability, and the speed of dissemination. The system integrates upstream processes with downstream activities, supporting by cutting-edge technology and strategic collaboration. We thank to the international community for their support in helping us achieve what we have today. The monitoring system has expanded significantly, as well as the processing system. The downstream system ensures the tsunami warning reaches the public and stakeholders quickly and effectively through interface institution. And the community preparedness is an essential part of this warning system. So the development of the Ignatius showcases Indonesia's commitment to creating a robust and reliable tsunami early warning system. The focus on leveraging technology, expanding sensors network, and fostering collaboration with interface institution ensures that Indonesia is better prepared for tsunami threats. So there are still gaps that we need to tackle. First, lack of data, especially on the ocean. Need to learn more and strengthen the knowledge of non-seismic tsunami and improve the observation. Robust communication is essential for rapid and timely warning dissemination. However, the cost of communication still being an issue for us, especially Indonesia is an archipelagic country. The enhancement of development of the early warning system also requires strong leadership at both the local and national level. Science diplomacy is a key factor in influencing the decision maker, including the politician. Recalling the success of the UNESCO IOC second Global Tsunami Symposium in Banda Aceh last November that commemorate our 20 years of tsunami event, resulted in a very strong statement. Global tsunami warning and mitigation system building sustainability for the next decade through transformation and innovation. UNESCO and its partners call on state and civil society to significantly increase their awareness or investment and efforts to achieve 100 tsunami-ready communities worldwide by 2030. It is crucial to engage in science diplomacy, where scientists can approach the politician to persuade government to invest in initiatives that will accelerate the achievement of 100 tsunami-ready community to save society and civilization. I would like to conclude my presentation to mention that 2004 tsunami served as powerful catalyst for action, motivating the development of integrated monitoring systems embedded within the end-to-end tsunami warning and response framework. Although significant progress has been made, but continuous improvement and collective commitment are still needed to ensure that we are all protected by early warning system as emphasized by the UN Secretary General. Thank you very much. I will give the floor. No? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
I'm going to beg everyone's pardon with a little bit of switch up this morning. I got a little bit out of order, and so I'm going to do something very unconventional. I want to make sure to tell you Dr. Nelly's bio, so I beg your patience with that. I want to let you know that Dr. Ryama is chair of the WMO IOC Data Buoy Cooperation Panel, and also the GOOS National Focal Point and core member of the WMO Steering Committee Marine Meteorological Observation. Her extensive experience includes former positions as the director of the Center for Education and Training at BMKG Indonesia and director of the Indonesian Regional Training Center of WMO for Meteorology. Next, we will hear from Dr. Laura Kong of NOAA's National Weather Service. And this time, I'm going to do it in the correct order and tell you Dr. Kong's bio. Dr. Kong has been the director of the International Tsunami Information Center since 2001, predating the 2004 event. As director, she oversees a center that supports the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission in its efforts to deploy tsunami warning and mitigation systems globally, and works directly with a 46-nation intergovernmental coordination group for the Pacific Tsunami Warning and Mitigation System to strengthen the national tsunami warnings and preparedness. Without further ado, Dr. Kong.
Good morning. So what I'd like to do in the next 5 minutes or so is kind of briefly go go over a number of things. Hopefully it's a review for all of you, but I think it's good to remind us of what has happened and what we can do forward. So I just wanted to say a couple things, a few facts, just talking about earthquakes and large earthquakes. These great earthquakes, more than magnitude 8, are ones that actually are the ones that are going to be dangerous for tsunamis. We're looking at shallow undersea earthquakes very near to the shore, and when those happen, they can cause and generate tsunamis. So this is an image that was done by the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, just capturing the last 100 years of earthquakes. And you can see earthquakes are occurring everywhere around the world, along the active ring of fire, along the active subduction zones. And you can see also that, I'll just go ahead and play it again, but also that they are dangerous in the slide on the left, not only from afar, so that's the slide on the left which talks about teletsunamis or tsunamis that have gone across the Pacific Great Basin, and you see in general there's mostly in the Pacific, but in 2004 the one in the Indian Ocean, and then in 1755 in Portugal. Those tsunamis, not very many, great earthquakes occurring, and they go across the ocean basins and they cause damage not only locally but also far away. Most of them are earthquakes observed over history are caused by earthquakes, something like 80%. And we find out from the slide on the right that in general, most of the observed tsunamis that we see over history are local or regional, and those are the ones that are hitting us within an hour or a couple of hours. And it turns out if you look historically in terms of fatalities, there were 90% of our deaths are occurring. It's those local or regional events, which talks about why we need to do as much as we can, not only for warning very quickly, but also in preparedness. So just another fact, as you know, these events are apolitical. They go across ocean basins. They can be a high fatality hazard. They're going to hit both locally. They go across, in this particular case, in the Indian Ocean. As Allison said, something like 220,000 people perished. That actually was in 15 countries in the Southern Oceans, East Asia, Eastern Africa. But that represented something like more than 53 countries' citizens that were actually perished. Caused 1 million people to be displaced, something like 10 billion. Huge, huge amount of impact. So it has a global impact. And afterwards, in January, we came out of this event at the UN level, and we had our Secretary General really say something very simple, not only for disasters in general, but tsunamis in particular. We can't stop these, right? We can't stop these natural calamities, but we can and we must do better to equip those individuals and communities to withstand them. And we actually should do that as much as we humanly can possible to build those resilient societies. So this was what was in place in 2004, right before the Indian Ocean tsunami hit. It was a system that was only in place in the Pacific. In large part, it's because that's where all our events are. Something like about 70% are in the Pacific. And it's where in 1960, this magnitude 9.5 earthquake in southern Chile killed people locally, but it went across the Pacific, killed people in Hawaii, went across the entire Pacific Ocean, killed people in Japan as well as the Philippines. And in response, the global community started this Pacific system in 1965. It was going, it was fine, except that in 2004, when this hit in Sumatra, that event was in the Indian Ocean, not in the Pacific. So we didn't have a system to officially warn at that time. So what happened? In the course of 6 months, a number of international meetings, both at this World Conference for Disaster Risk Reduction, which was in January of 2005, a small islands developing state global meeting that was in Mauritius, also in January 2005. But through a number of meetings under the umbrella also of the UNESCO Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, a system was started. That system was not only in the Indian Ocean, with the interim warnings started in March, just 4 months later, supported by the United States and the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, and Japan and the Japan Meteorological Agency. So they came up, stepped up in about 4 months, and they provided interim services for about 10 years ago to about 2013, when 3 countries stepped up and inaugurated that official system. Those 3 countries were Indonesia, represented by Dr. Florida, Australia, the Joint Tsunami Warning Center by the Bureau of Meteorology and the Geoscience Australia, and INCOAS in India, the India's National Oceanographic System. So a number of things done. I think we heard this from Indonesia, but we had to build observing and monitoring systems, forecasting systems. We had to build dissemination systems in an authoritative manner that were timely. We had to build hazard and risk assessment. Where, besides Indonesia, were there potential hazards? And we realized that in the Pakistan, in the Makran source area, there was potentially another event. And then finally, at the bottom, but most importantly, the preparedness. What do we need to do to make people respond as quickly as they can, especially for a local event? So this is where we are now. It's 2024. There are now 4 systems, not only in the Pacific, but the Indian Ocean, in the Mediterranean and North Atlantic, as well as in the Caribbean. They're supported by what we call tsunami service providers. They're providing those alerts to countries who then provide their own national alerting and warnings. And there are a number of countries in France, Portugal, Italy, and Turkey and Greece. In the Mediterranean, in the Indian Ocean, I said Indonesia, India, and Australia. In the Caribbean, it's also the United States for the Caribbean, the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center. And in the Pacific, we actually have the PTWC as the operational headquarters, but we also have Japan with a regional system in the Northwest Pacific, China for the South China Sea, and up and coming Nicaragua for Central America, both in the Pacific and the Caribbean. So what did we do? I just wanted to share. This was an effort, a monumental effort from those of us who are working in the field in the Pacific, but to spread our knowledge, to build that capacity for those countries in the Pacific. And ITIC was one of them. Over the course of the last 20 years, we've been all over the world, focusing first on the Indian Ocean, but coming back to the Pacific, the Caribbean, and the Mediterranean. And I just call your attention that, most of you know about this Tonga event in 2022, the big volcanic eruption that also caused a tsunami. It turns out that the Kingdom of Tonga took things into their own hands, and the meteorological service actually said we must train our meteorologists and our forecasters to do tsunamis. They took that initiative, something like we visited there 5 times. Over the course of 15 years, almost all their staff got trained, so that when this happened in 2022, it was not a tsunami, it was a volcano, but they were able to react because they had kind of practiced those procedures and what to do in a catastrophic event. So we built procedures, warning center operations, emergency response procedures for response. We built things having to do with communities, how to evacuate, what kind of planning you need, what kind of preparedness do you need. We talked about exercises. There are international exercises since 2006 in the Pacific, in the Caribbean, in the Indian Ocean, and the Mediterranean. And at the same time, we said, what do we do to move forward? And this is about the next decade, this so-called UN Ocean Decade, a tsunami program that's looking at what do we need to put as better sensors, more densely located, smart, you talked about smart cables, putting sensors on the seafloor, on telecom cables, expanding access, how can we use the global positioning system to improve, and then making sure at the same time that not only at the international level from some of us here, but at the national level, these countries, especially the small ones, have the confidence to make those right decisions. And I'm going to just leave this for here, and if I say anything, we can do all that we can in terms of the technical warning and putting out a message very quickly on a wireless alert. But if we don't do the things at the community to make sure they know what to do, especially if for some reason the comms break down and they have to act on the end. So this is this program called Tsunami Ready. It talks about building resiliency at the community level. So I'll just show this short video. And then that, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Laura. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Vasily Titov of NOAA's Pacific Marine Environmental Laboratory. Dr. Titov is a mathematician and oceanographer and an expert in long-wave modeling, tsunami hazard assessment, tsunami modeling, and tsunami forecasting. He's been involved in oceanographic and tsunami research for over 25 years, again, predating the event 20 years ago, and published over 100 research papers on the subject of long-wave modeling, hazard assessment, and forecast. Dr. Titov has developed the MOST model that is now being used for operational tsunami forecasts in NOAA's National Weather Service. As the research lead of NOAA's Center for Tsunami Research, Dr. Titov guided the efforts to develop practical capability to forecast tsunamis for the U.S. and internationally. At this point, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Alison. Few illustrations about the development of the tsunami, what's called tsunami forecast, and how it changed and evolved since the 2004 Boxing Day tsunami. So I represent tsunami research, so we work in support of the operational tsunami warning of NOAA. So we develop tools to help do the actionable and effective tsunami forecast. So tsunami forecast, what we call, or sometimes it's called real-time tsunami forecast, is the process that you use to predict tsunami impact at the coastlines, hopefully before tsunami hit. And that is used in tsunami warning to predict the coastlines, the people at the coastlines where the tsunami impact is expected to be the worst. So that's the technology that we use behind the tsunami forecast. The picture that you see on the left here is from the 2004 Boxing Day taken in Thailand. It sort of illustrates why we need tsunami forecast. So the forecast for these people that you see on the picture, which all of them survived, by the way. There are interviews of them after the fact. Did receive the forecast, but it was very rudimentary forecast based on the visual assessment of the tsunami wave that's coming in. So first of all, there was, numerically, quantitatively very approximate. And second of all, it was very late. You could see that we would definitely want the forecast to be much more technologically advanced and much faster. So that's what we've been working on over the years. And the technology of the tsunami forecast has been evolving all the time since the inception of the first tsunami warning system in Japan back in the 1940s. But the main sort of jump in the technology, especially in the tsunami forecast, definitely has occurred after the Boxing Day tsunami. And the two main things that actually changed in the technology of tsunami forecast is the tsunami observations that go into the real-time tsunami forecast. That's real-time observations that measure tsunamis before they hit coastlines, and the modeling. The modeling allows you to take this data and look ahead in time, so it can predict where tsunami would occur, would strike the most severely. So to contrast it with what happened in 2004, the modeling was there. We were developing the modeling capabilities before 2004 internationally, not only in NOAA. This model that you see of this tsunami has been done actually during the tsunami, while the tsunami was still propagating. But it was really difficult to call it forecast because the model was very slow. The data was assembled manually, and the accuracy of this model was very uncertain. So it was completed pretty much when the wave was hitting, was exiting Indian Ocean. That's when this model was completed. But even then, the value of this model was shown to be very high, just by the number of requests that we get for the results of this model. So there was definitely shown two things. First of all, the models, we need models which are much faster and much more accurate. And first of all, we need data that can be fed into the model in real time. Because for this model, the accuracy check came only weeks after, when the satellite data was assessed days after the event. Then the data was massaged for a couple of weeks, and then finally we figured out that the model that we created was somewhat accurate, and that you see the comparison of that in real time. So that's definitely needed improvement. The data. What did we have the data available? What kind of data we had available before 2004 for the forecast capabilities? So the data that you can measure tsunami while it's propagating. Not so much. And you saw the maps that Laura has shown. The tsunami warning capabilities and tsunami forecast was focused on the Pacific Ocean. What you see on this map is the major faults that create tsunami, historical tsunami, sort of in a vague circles there. So that shows where the hazard of tsunami is. And then in triangles, you see this experimental tsunami detection system was called Deep Ocean Assessment and Reporting of Tsunami that developed in our lab. And at that time, we were experimenting with using it in real time. So these 6 systems were deployed in the Indian Ocean, in the Pacific Ocean. There were some cable systems in Japan at that time. Nothing was available in that respect for anywhere else, including the Indian Ocean. And so that's what I said. But when you fast forward after to present time, that's the system of the real-time tsunami measuring capability that can be used in forecast. That's how it looks now. It's a joint development international program that has some 75 dart buoys spread around all oceans. So every coastline for every ocean is covered now by tsunami warning system that Laura has described. But in terms of technology, we have now technology to detect any tsunami from pretty much any major fault. And that's the major development in terms of the tsunami detection. So what it did already is that we don't have any false alarms anymore. False alarms is that tsunami warning that were perceived by public to be false alarm in quotes. So that's when tsunami warning was issued, but no real tsunami was observed in the coastline. That was the biggest problem before 2004, and that was in fact the reason why this DART system was developed. So after this array of of DART buoys were deployed, we pretty much eliminated this problem. So now we know exactly if tsunami warning is issued, tsunami is on the way, verified by detection, and the public does understand that too. Now we have tsunami amplitude forecast. So that was something that was absent before 2004. And we have like we have all the 100% of tsunamis are detected in deep ocean, even those that do not reproduce danger. But that's important because we do want to know if tsunami is not dangerous, because we don't want to overwhelm people. In terms of the modeling, all these capabilities in tsunami detection played out to become into the development of the forecast capability that's using modeling. So the tsunami in 2011 was what happened when multiple tsunami DART buoys were already, tsunami detection systems were available. So this model that you see here was done in real time, and at that time it was already done in time to predict tsunamis in all coastlines of US. It was verified by the multiple DART buoys that you see on the bottom, and we knew that this forecast model that went ahead of time, that was developed, that was done a few hours before tsunami hit Hawaii and then the West Coast, that it was accurate. So quite a bit of difference between before 2004. However, we are not done yet in any measure of any efficiency. Laura has mentioned that most of the fatalities occur near the tsunami source. And that, what we call local tsunami forecast problem, is the biggest challenge of the tsunami forecast. So we definitely need more quicker detection and quicker models to forecast that. What you see here on the map is the same 2011 tsunami, but impact of local Sendai plains that's happening about 1 hour after the tsunami was generated, and that showed to be a big problem because thousands of people died and could not receive the warning in time. So that's ongoing challenge. Tsunami present ongoing challenge. You may or may not know, but after 2004, over 50 tsunamis has occurred, and many of them are impactful. Over 20,000 people died since the 2004. So it's ongoing problem, and while we are developing the technology for the forecast, we definitely not done. A lot more needs to be done, and the impact of these events are pretty huge. Since 2004, over $200 billion in damage. And fresh off the press, the AGU at one of the presentations at AGU, FEMA just unveiled the new report that showed that just for U.S. coastlines, just for the earthquake-generated tsunamis, which is about 80% of them, the exposure of the tsunami, the risk for the tsunami coastline is about $1 billion annually, which is a substantial threat and substantial risk for tsunamis. So the hazard is there. And in 2021, I'm sorry, there was the scientific meeting in Sendai, and there is this community called Kuroshio-cho that's facing imminent threat for tsunami in Japan. And they're facing this Nankai Trench that is known to produce tsunami sometime in the future. And that's going to be devastating tsunami. They have been historically devastating, and we know the prediction are that it's going to be bad for this small community. It's going to be completely flooded. So what can we do that? This community, the small community, challenge science community to introduce new metric for the efficiency of the tsunami warning. 0 victims. That's a huge challenge. That's absolutely a huge challenge, and technology can provide only parts of the solution, as there's no question about that. So what was reported in before from Indonesia, from the international communities, the planning, education needs to be done along with the technology. But then if what technology can provide is actionable, fast, and accurate warning for everybody on the coastline. So that's the contribution that we are striving for, and that's a huge challenge. 0 victims definitely is something that we will strive for, but there's lots to do.
Thank you, Vasily. Next up will be Dr. Nathan Wood of the U.S. Geological Survey. Dr. Wood supervises the Western Geographic Science Center Hazard Vulnerability Team that specializes in societal vulnerability science, geospatial modeling, and web mapping applications. He has conducted research and written extensively on community vulnerability to natural hazards, such as asset exposure, demographic sensitivity, and pedestrian evacuation modeling. And he has done work related to tsunami threats in Washington, Oregon, California, Hawaii, Alaska, American Samoa, and Guam. That includes volcanic hazards in Washington and California, and coastal hazards in California, the Pacific Northwest, and the U.S. Eastern Seaboard. Nathan?
Thanks, Al. Thanks, Allison. So I was asked to effectively bring us home on this panel, and that's in 2 ways. One is geographically. We started with a great comments from Nelly about Indonesia, and so the question now is, how are things here in the U.S. 20 years later? And then also from another way to interpret bringing it home is the actual people, the science and technology of how to alert people. Laura and Vasily gave great comments on that. My research, my science and technology is about the people that actually might die. So the people that are on the beach, at that Starbucks, living there, to a daycare every day. So looking at the demographics and will they actually have enough time to get out? Because 0 victims is a wonderful idea, but you might have questions in certain communities, at least on the U.S. coastline. So again, this is kind of a very brief 5 minutes, I think, of where we were pre-Indian Ocean and where we are today. And pre-Indian Ocean, in 2004, there was work happening on tsunamis in terms of hazard assessments. It was a collection of 5 states, largely in the Pacific. And since then, there's been, and the map to the left is, I'm in Portland, Oregon, so that is Astoria and Warrenton, and a red line. This is probably where we think the tsunami would end, okay? And there was some great work at the time being done. Flash forward 20 years, now we have a lot more happening where this is a Oregon evacuation map in the middle. Does this have a pointer? That's okay. The yellow and orange one in the middle shows this is the inundation from a distant event from Alaska, and the yellow is this is the inundation area from a local event that shows up in 10 minutes. Okay? We have evacuation modeling happening. We have a lot of engagement. This is a shot up in Alaska with a tsunami modeler working with the community to understand inundation areas, evacuation opportunities. There's vertical evacuation shelters being built. That is in Washington. And then there is some great outreach happening, and this is a beautiful mural down in Puerto Rico socializing that this is the way to go. And it's one thing to put up a sign, metal sign that often college kids steal for their dorm, but that's much harder to steal, and that's a lot more beautiful than a little metal sign. Okay, so a lot of this is, or all this is being done in the U.S. under something called the U.S. National Tsunami Hazard Mitigation Program. And it's administered by the Weather Service, a tsunami program. It's interagency, so at the federal level, it's USGS, it's FEMA, it's NOAA as the core federal folks, and then literally every state and territory that has a tsunami threat, which is every U.S. coastline to varying degrees. And so we have representation from emergency management organizations, and we have representation from geological agencies, or more broadly, I'll just say science agencies. And so that's available online, the new strategic plan that just came out, I think in March or so, and it gets into all the different things that NTHMP is doing. So it's a coordinated national effort. So it involves things like lessons learned and sharing of best practices on hazard and risk assessment, tsunami education and preparedness, mitigation and recovery, and then alert, warning, and response. And so this group literally gets together where you have someone in the Virgin Islands and someone in Guam and someone in Alaska talking about, hey, how do you map your hazards? Hey, how do you educate your folks? Because we also have cruise ships. We also have Starbucks in the tsunami zone. So a big advance also in the past 20 years, I'll take a step back just on the hazard itself, is there's been a lot more work on the seismic sources, but also on the non-seismic sources. And so this graphic has a lot in it, but you can ask me, what's that black line versus red dot mean? But in general, the red lines or red points are all these local sources that come with, arrive within about 10 to 20 minutes, depending on where you are, the wave itself. There's a big earthquake locally, wave shows up in 10 to 20 minutes in most places. The black lines or dots are those distant events. So in Alaska, earthquake happens, they have a local tsunami, they have to run within tens of minutes to survive the wave. And then 4 hours later, 5 hours later, 6 hours in some places, Hawaii, Oregon, and Washington also get that wave. And so the evacuation potential changes from the exact same source. And then finally, there's been huge advances in submarine landslides, where you have failure under the water. Imagine being in a bathtub and just doing that. That's a submarine landslide. And so you have these submarine landslides that in some cases in Alaska show up literally in 1 minute. So the question is, how much warning can one actually give someone when there's 1 minute before the wave shows up? And then there's some sources on the East Coast and the Gulf where you might be talking more about 2 to 3 hours of arrival time. So you might have come in thinking like, oh, tsunami, that's a Crescent City, California, that's a Hawaii thing. There are tsunami threats on the East Coast. There are threats in the Gulf of Mexico where inundation modeling has been done. And so we went from that simple red line to now, as I said earlier, being able to show here's where if the event happened in Alaska, here's where you might want to evacuate in the town of Cannon Beach. And the yellow and that's where a warning system will provide incredible support. And then there's that yellow zone where the ability for the warning system to help is diminished because someone has really minutes to spare, and the warning is really that ground shaking. They get back up, and then through a lot of education and training, they know to just move to high ground. There's been a lot of advances in trying to figure out who is actually in these zones. And there's been, in the past it was like, well, who are the people living there? And like, well, that's definitely, there are people that live in a tsunami zone. There are also people that work in tsunami zones, seafood processing, timber processing, Starbucks. There are people that happen to go into a tsunami zone every day to go shopping. That's a church, and that's a city hall. All of these are in the tsunami zone in the Northwest. And the real fun one is, how about the tens of thousands of people that are flying in from Iowa for the day to go to a cool place in Hawaii or Oregon or wherever? So we have casinos, I'll jump there, we have hotels, and then if you've seen Sharknado, those movies, we actually have the potential for our own Sharknado. There's an aquarium on the Oregon coast where you walk through a tube and sharks are all around you. So imagine the magnitude 9 earthquake happened, and then in about 20 minutes, a tsunami wave comes in. So that'll be interesting. I'll just leave it at that. And then finally, the folks who actually depend on you to get out. Those are folks at daycares and schools, assisted living facilities, and jails. Okay, so there's a lot more than just you should run for the hills. And there's been great strides in 20 years to help figure out where are these pockets of people and what kind of education or outreach or training do they need. What kind of people is the first step, and then can they make it out? And so great strides in evacuation modeling. I won't get into all the weeds because you'll be really bored after a while, but we have elevation, imagery, land cover, the hazard zone, the residents, the businesses. That goes into the gumbo, and we can now figure out optimal evacuation travel times. This is ocean shores. The black line is when the wave will probably show up in terms of time. That's a 25-minute mark. Everyone south of there will likely have insufficient time. States are now taking this to make much better maps than I can make for their kiosks along the beach. And we can also merge that with demographic data to get a sense of how many folks will or will not have enough time to get out. We've also used this modeling and published on, after the event, where are the survivors? There's a huge community of 30,000 people. Where are they in the woods? If they are in a place they won't make it out in time, where can they build tsunami vertical evacuation shelters? And this is an 18-mile stretch of land, and building the 30 that they might want might not be plausible. So how do you begin to determine where they might want to build and help support them in their very value-laden decision-making? Then finally, once we have an idea of who's in the zone, can they make it out potentially, how can we help them evacuate? So it's things like there's been great strides in making better evacuation route maps that actually have directions, like you are here, you're new to town, go that way, instead of just having a sign that says you're in the zone, you should run for the hills. There's a great amount of signage. I already talked about using murals to socialize the evacuation issue. This is that paper I talked about where we could model the different costs and benefits of where you might site an evacuation shelter. And then finally, these are being built. We have one in the Shoalwater area. There is one in Newport, and there's one on the roof of a elementary school in Acosta. So there is a lot. This wasn't happening 20 years ago. So I'll stop there.
I'd like to thank our speakers today before we take questions, and let everyone know that in addition to the many resources that they have shown and the presentation today being available, NOAA has created a new website with lots of basic tsunami information and all kinds of photos and downloadable information. So that's at noaa.gov. And at this point, I'm looking for, there she is, my friend Liza, who will be taking the questions.
Right, thank you, Allison. We have time for a few questions. If you're a reporter in the room, and only reporters, please raise your hand. I'll bring you this mic. Please introduce yourself and your publication so we know who is asking the question. If you're online, put your question in the Q&A box. Any takers? No problem.
So I'm Dan Vergano. I'm an editor at Scientific American. About this Sharknado thing. Actually, well, if you want to talk to that, that's fine. But what I'm wondering is there places on the East Coast or in the Gulf Coast, Nathan, I'm talking, that you're particularly concerned about, or we should be calling attention to this threat to that we're not doing as well as we should? Thanks. Or anywhere, really.
It's already on. All right, I was looking for a green dot. So I will preface to say that I am not the lead on the hazard modeling itself. And so Stefan Greeley, who is a fantastic professor in oceanography at University of Rhode Island, is the best person to be asking about the modeling, the hazard inundation modeling itself. And so I think it is an emerging discipline. So there's no smoking gun of, oh, people are ignoring this topic. He's been working through NTHMP funding for many, many years to start working on these submarine landslides, and they're having more workshops. And so there's no one town that I would say, oh my gosh, it's going to be horrible there. I think on the East Coast, they have a Puerto Rican trench event that would be, for them, a distant event, so they might have 4 to 5 hours, but it's very low lying, as you know, here on the East Coast. And so you're talking about millions of people that, quote, may need to do something. So whether or not they can shelter by just going upstairs, if they do have a second floor, that's unknown right now. And so I wouldn't want to have any message that, like, oh my God, the East Coast, everyone's gonna die tomorrow. There's a lot more work, and Stefan's work is the first step. We are working with FEMA next year to improve the National Risk Index on the tsunami front to include these submarine landslides in some capacity, and we really have to sort out those evacuation challenges, because there are millions, but they have several hours. They might be able to go upstairs, and but at the same time, we have barrier islands with one bridge. And so you have, a scenario that in theory could strike, parts of the southeast in a matter of an hour. And an open question also is how the tsunami warning centers might be able to play a role in that, because there's different physics involved and different processes than a tectonic earthquake. The Gulf is more about submarine landslide scenarios, and that's a different person, Juan Herrillo at Texas A&M, who's been doing all that modeling. But I do know from our work with him, the Mississippi Canyon is probably the most pronounced scenario that would create effectively hurricane storm surge inundation through the whole Gulf in about 2 hours. And so again, the question is, can people go upstairs? Can they just move 3 blocks over? And they have an hour to do that. And so those are open questions. So I wouldn't, pigeonhole it to a very simplistic, oh, that one town is totally in trouble, I would never go there. But I think submarine landslides is a huge issue and opportunity. And I even threw out, I mentioned it quickly, but in Alaska, these small towns have minutes to go. And that's a failure right in front of their port that could cause a very small localized, but still it could inundate the first 2 rows of houses. So I think there's a lot more there to figure out, are evacuations possible? What would that look like? Is that purely an outreach effort? Or is there something that the warning systems, with different technology possibly, could handle those submarine landslides? Well, we can get into the weeds if you want more. Yeah.
Probably have time for one more question. Anyone in the room? Looking around, going once, going twice. All right, thank you so much. We have.
Laura's got a comment, yeah.
I think I just wanted to share and remind everyone, statistically over history, it's earthquakes that are still causing the majority of the tsunamis, especially the dangerous ones. The numbers of landslides or volcanoes or something like maybe 5 to 10% over history. That's not to say that it won't just happen as a volcano and a landslide tomorrow and the next day, but we really want to make sure at least we take care of the earthquake issue. And that would be not only for everywhere on the U.S., whether it's Puerto Rico, Cascadia, Alaska, American Samoa, but all around the world. So just kind of a reminder, but a sobering reminder. Thank you.
And I think that's an excellent point, and I'm not pushing back in any way. But it's a question of the warning systems and what they can do, because statistically speaking, 80% or so do happen from earthquake-generated events. But the other 20% can still kill lots of people. And statistically speaking, 9/11 wasn't supposed to happen. And so I always get nervous when people lean too much into probabilities, because there's a risk tolerance. There's a whole field of psychology on risk tolerance, willingness to pay, optimism bias. So submarine landslides are possible, but perhaps that is not something that the warning systems may be ever. I mean, it's 1 minute, minute and a half for a landslide in Juneau. So I can't imagine the technology that's even possible, at least right now, that would be able to support that. So that seems to be more of an outreach issue and a training issue and a local issue that possibly the federal role might be helping to raise the issue, but I'm not sure there's right now a technology that would support that. So it's just helping to sort out the tsunami thing is a very complex question because it involves, for me, surviving a tsunami is two things: the science and technology to know that it's possible and it just happened, and the human behavior to run. And technology can't solve that second one. So the role of outreach, social scientists helping to figure out, do people in Juneau know? Would they know if all of a sudden their docks disappeared? Would they know what to do in that moment? So I think that's a huge area for growth, is the human behavior aspects, which there's been a handful, but not tons of research on, do people know? Would they know what to do in that moment? I mean, 20 years ago that we had a study done by some colleagues in New Zealand in the Washington area where they asked, I think, 22 hotel people at the front desk, and what would you do for a tsunami? And 19 out of 22 were like, what's a tsunami? So there's a lot more to be done on the human behavior side.
All right, with that, I think we do have to bring this to a close as we're at time. Thank you so much to our speakers. And if you want to follow up, Allison's contact is there. You can reach us at AGU News. Our next event is this afternoon at 1:30 in this room. It's our only afternoon press conference. So please come back to hear about what we should do about space trash in low Earth orbit. Lunch is out now, so go enjoy that. Thank you, panelists. It was great.